Okay, so we're going to kick off our chapter on social psychology, first with a definition of what social psych is, and then we're going to delve into first topic of social thinking. So, definition of social psychology is the scientific study of how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. And over the course of this unit, we're going to zoom into each of those areas. We're going to start with how we think about other people. And so, a really big area in social thinking research is looking into what we call attribution theory. And attribution is a term we've encountered a couple of times already this year. You should recognize the word maybe from within the term misattribution when we talked about source amnesia and how sometimes our memory can get a little bit mixed up and you can forget the source of information. When we talk about attributing your sources correctly when you write a paper, it just means to identify, where information comes from. So attribution theory, as it applies to people and especially how we think about other people, was studied in depth by Fritz Heider in the 50s. And attribution theory holds that we have two basic ways that we can understand someone's behavior. Because the attribution we're looking to make here is we're trying to figure out the cause or the source of someone's behavior, what's driving them. And we have two choices, Heider says. We either attribute someone's behavior to the situation, or we attribute their behavior to their personality or their disposition. And so we can either make a situational attribution or we can make a dispositional attribution. And so an example, let's say you pass one of your friends in the hallway, but they don't say hello to you. There are two ways we can interpret their behavior in that situation. We can either say, a situational attribution and say that maybe they were in a hurry and didn't see us and that's why they didn't say hello. That's blaming the situation for their behavior. Or we could say that they're rude or they're mean or they're a thoughtless person. That would be blaming their disposition or their personality. Now, what attribution theory has shown us is we have a tendency to make a fundamental attribution error, or the FAE. And what the fundamental attribution error is, and it's something we make all the time, is even though we have this choice of either the situation or someone's personality explains why they're doing what they do, more often than not, we credit their personality, even to the point where it no longer makes rational sense. Logically, people's personalities aren't driving all of their decisions. When we learned about personality theory, we even talked about the person-situation controversy. And we said that honestly, a social cognitive perspective tells us environment matters a lot, but we have this tendency to overestimate the influence of personality and underestimate the influence of situations. Example, you're out to eat at a restaurant and your waiter or your waitress doesn't check on your table for like 15, 20 minutes. And when they finally do, they've gotten your order wrong or they didn't bring you something you wanted. And how often, as a customer, do people blame the waiter or waitress for character flaws? They're lazy, they're forgetful, they don't care enough. When in actuality, and especially if you've been in the service industry, you know they could be the only waiter or waitress who showed up to work that day. They could have something going on in their home life. They could have something else situationally that's determining their behavior, but we time and time and time again blame the personality. What I want to make clear is the fundamental attribution error refers to how we overestimate the influence of personality. And we have a tendency to credit personality more often than situation. But the error doesn't necessarily mean that we're wrong. There is a chance that the waiter or waitress is just careless or is just thoughtless. But by assuming they are and by ignoring the impact of the situation, that's where we make the error. I'll give you one last example of the fundamental attribution error. I think sometimes it's easy to think of those examples where we assume almost the worst in people. Someone cuts you off on the road and you don't assume that the situation made them do that. You don't say, oh, wow, like they must have done that because they have a really important meeting to get to, or like they're driving someone to the hospital. Instead, we say, wow, they're so rude, like they're the worst person, and we blame their personality. It's easy to think of those negative examples, but it can also work the other way. For example, all of my students seem like really lovely individuals. I interpret their saying hello to me every day as a sign that they're really kind and they're really welcoming. Is that accurate? I hope it's accurate, but it also could be a product of I'm their teacher, and so y'all are saying hello to me, not necessarily because you're kind and welcoming, but because you're just playing the game. I'm your teacher, and so the situation dictates that you have to be polite. And it should come as no surprise to you that the fundamental attribution error is actually more commonly made in individualistic Western societies. We know that we have a tendency to look to the individual. We almost pride ourselves on individuals directing outcomes. And so we are more likely here in an individualistic society to look to someone's character or their personality for an explanation for their behavior, as opposed to the situation, which is what might happen more in a collectivist society. Um, so a couple of questions that I want you to think about. First, how might the fundamental attribution error factor into one's interpretation of like poverty or unemployment or relying on the welfare system? Because there are certainly some common interpretations which seem to reflect the FAE. Second, think about if you've ever been judged according to the FAE and if you can identify a time when that has happened. And maybe it worked to your benefit or to your detriment. And then lastly, have you ever judged others according to the fundamental attribution error? Answers to 2 and 3 are, of course, but what's really going to be helpful is if you can identify specifically when that's happened.